All right, guys, sometimes these vegan doctors can be quite deceptive, and they can put out some science, and sometimes they'll just kind of give you part of the picture, and it takes a little bit of time, and it's a little bit challenging to put all the pieces in place to show you where they're making their errors. Now, sometimes they just say stupid shit, I mean, to be honest. And this is one of those ones where it's just so ridiculous that it's almost fun to pick apart. And so we're going to do that with a video that a guy named Dr. Milton Mills, who is a very prominent vegan. I think he might even be an ER physician or an internal medicine physician. I'm not sure exactly what his specialty is, but he comes up with the most ridiculous nonsense that I have almost ever heard. And he talks about the fact that he says that humans are not scavengers or hunters or anything like that. We evolved as strict herbivores, and he makes some statements which are quite comical. So let's kind of talk about some of those things. And first of all, he says, the more that we get rid of animal products in the diet, the healthier and healthier we are. Well, let's look at a few studies that would sort of refute some of those claims. So this 2020 study in Critical Reviews in Food Science says the majority of studies, especially those of higher quality studies, show that those that avoided meat consumption had significantly higher rates of self-harm, depression, and anxiety behaviors. That to me doesn't sound like, it improving your health. And in fact, another 2020 study in the BMC Medicine showed that non-meat eaters, especially vegans, had higher risk of either total risk of fracture, some site-specific fractures, particularly hip fractures. Now again, breaking your hip does not sound like a resounding way to claim that your health is better, right? That's not particularly helpful. 2021 study, Molecular Nutrition and Food Research, showed that again, vegans have significantly high rates of B12 deficiencies despite supplementation in many cases, and can possibly inadvertently lead to greater rates of cancer. So again, these things do not seem to sort of comport for a much healthier diet. Also, we have 900, almost 1,000 success stories alone on Carnivore Diet, where you can read about all the people. Many of them were former vegans who got significantly better. Now he goes back and says we are designed, I guess by higher power, to consume a strictly plant-based diet. Now let's go back to a little comparative anatomy. Herbivores typically come in two varieties, either foregut fermenters or hindgut fermenters. Remember, all that low-quality forage that they're consuming, all the plant matter needs to be broken down adequately, and we have to have the anatomy to do that. Now humans don't really have either of those. We're not ruminants. We don't have these big foreguts, and we're not hindgut fermenters like horses or even gorillas. We're neither. Now, we have a small capacity to ferment a small amount of calories in our hindgut, but we have a relatively small colon. We don't really have a cecum, or we just have a very small remnant of one compared to these, other primates and other animals that are hindgut fermenters, like I said, like horses and gorillas. We have several organs that are specialized for eating meat and fat. Our small intestine particularly is designed to break down protein and fat and absorb it in a very effective fashion. We have a gallbladder, again, which is designed to, once again, break down fat. We don't have any rumors or any specialized organs to allow us to particularly ferment to a significant degree plant material. Now he says that there's people saying that we've evolved to eat meat, myself and many others like that. But he says there's no physicians that are putting forth that idea, and I would say there are many physicians, myself and many others included, that are actually putting forth that very sentiment. So he's quite wrong in that. Now he also says that there's no way that primitive man could have possibly hunted enough to gather enough calories in order to feed themselves, and so he must have just spent hours and hours a day just gathering plant material to consume. Now, I'd like to introduce you somebody like Ryan Gill, who basically recreates the primitive hunting process and shows you exactly how we did it and how much of the evidence shows that we've done that. Now, there's lots of scientific evidence that shows that we were hunters. The 2022 Frontiers in Ecology and Evolution article shows that we showed cut marks in butchery evidence 2 million years ago. We've had toolkits for butchery for that long. Cooperative hunting of large herbivores, it's been shown again and again and again. Humans also use the services of their companion animal, the dog, for a long time to help us hunt. Now, the earliest evidence of human ancestors eating meat goes back 3.4 million years, looking at Australopithecus afarensis, being one of the first ones that showed some signs of meat eating. Here's an interesting one. He says that the thought that we could have scavenged meat, back early on before we got proficient in hunting was just ridiculous. There's no way that humans could have possibly sterilized meat that had been out and potentially was exposed to bacteria. We just don't have the capacity of that. We have the stomach pH of herbivores, which is patently false. We clearly, in many, many studies corroborate this, have stomach pH of 1.5 to sometimes as high as 2. This is far greater stomach acid than many carnivores have. It's more in line with scavengers, things like hyenas and vultures and other creatures that are largely scavengers. And, later on, he goes on to make some other ridiculous claims, which I'll have to share with you in a second. Our trophic level in the food chain was defined by our stomach acidity. Acidity sterilizes food and acts as a filter for scavengers and other predators. This article in PLOS One out of 2015 corroborates that. He says that we could not possibly have scavenged food because predators guard their kills very, very effectively. Now, again, we have clear evidence of that. We've got that on video of humans actually taking the prey away from lions, and they've done it now, and they've done it for arguably many, many thousands of years. Now, he says there's no advantages for humans eating large amounts of protein. Plant diets are what we should all be consuming. And he goes on to say something about the human brain. It's mostly fatty tissue, and it burns only pure glucose, and it's the only thing it can use. Well, that's actually not true. The brain is largely fat. 20% of it is cholesterol, and we need fat in our diet to stimulate brain growth. The brain, incidentally, can burn up to 75% of its calories from ketones, so we don't have to just have pure glucose to do that. He says there's nothing about meat in any way that stimulates brain development. Well, we see that, being in a state of ketosis with a low carbohydrate effect is more efficient for fuel for the brain. It improves mitochondrial function. It improves neurotransmitter function. It reduces inflammation and oxidative stress, and it also increases neural network stability and can increase cognition. And this is beneficial from an evolutionary standpoint. Journal of Psychiatry and Brain Science in 2021 shows a number of those things. Now, our bodies store protein in what's called muscle, and muscle, last I checked, was important. Now, despite the fact that guys like Dr. Grieger don't seem to care about muscle, muscle is very important for our function and our health. We can also store the glucose that that is sometimes converted. And remember, if we consume plenty of protein, we can turn some of that into glucose and also ketone bodies. If we think about that, how do other animals that don't consume much carbohydrates exist at all? I mean, we have cheetahs and lions. They do very, very effectively on a higher protein diet. Now, again, we are not those, but there's certainly evidence that protein can be utilized in a very effective manner physiologically. If there's no physiologic benefit to protein, I'd check out the one video that talks about, is your doctor a dummy? Now remember, there are states of protein deficiency. Kwashiorkor is very common in developing countries where inadequate protein leads to significant issues. Now, he mentions that if hunting would have stimulated our brain, the carnivores would have the biggest brains of all animals. Well, that's actually true. We are humans, we are carnivorous, we have the biggest brains of all of the primates. When we look in the oceans, whales and dolphins, strict carnivores, they have the biggest brains of any sea-going mammals. On a pound-per-pound basis, carnivore animals have larger brains than do their herbivore counterparts. So if you take two animals that are the same approximate size, one's a carnivore, one's an herbivore, guess what's going to have the bigger brain? The carnivore will. He basically proves the point. Now, he claims that we needed a bigger brain to figure out what flowers to come back to later in the year to pick fruit. Now, the problem with that is monkeys already do that, and they don't have very big brains, so we don't need the big brain. Our brain didn't develop it because we are eating fruit repeatedly. Monkeys were already doing that with a really small brain. One of the things he says is that
we cover it with all of these plant products to try and make it taste like plants, which is what our brain really wants.
We want it to our meat to taste like broccoli, I suppose. Last time I checked, there's no one out there trying to do that, and they might put a little salt on there, but they're not necessarily trying to make their steak taste like some sort of plant. Now, vegans all the time are constantly trying to turn their mushed up plants into something that tastes like meat. In fact, there's entire companies dedicated to that. There's no companies dedicated to making meat taste like any kind of vegetable that I can think of. Now, this is the really kicker. Now, remember, he said that there's no way humans could have detoxified or killed the pathogens that came with meat and therefore we should eat plants. But at the same time, he turns around and says, where we got our B12 was from drinking contaminated, dirty water, or water that was contaminated by feces, perhaps.
We got B12 all the time from the dirt, from water sources, from, many things in our environment.
Again, if we don't have the capacity to kill these pathogens, why the hell would we be eating a bunch of dirt, right? So anyway, he seems to clearly contradict himself in that fashion, which I think is quite funny. Now, there is actually a part 2 to his video, and we'll have to go look at that and see if we want to pick that one apart. But this was, this again shows you the nonsense that these people are spewing. And I guess it takes a plant-based diet, a lack of adequate nutrition to the brain for you to believe that. And I guess those are the people that believe this stuff, the people that have already starved their brain. Anyway, let me know what you think. Do you think humans are strict herbivores, or are we meat eaters? Are we omnivores, or perhaps facultative carnivores, as I would pose? Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I think I'm going to go eat a steak because this hurt my brain watching this nonsense. We'll see you guys next time. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. We'll talk to you soon.